What's up, guys? Welcome to another one. It's time for tennis, and this is my VCORE 95 update video. I don't necessarily want to call it like an official review. It is an update on how I feel about the racket and how it's kind of fitting into my roster so far. So what do you call that? So I'm just going to call it the VCORE 95 review, but I want you to know I'm probably going to make another one sometime in the future because I am on this racket journey. And while this racket has definitely shown a lot of potential for me, I'm not 100% sure I'm going to keep it, but it's definitely showing some promise. That's my little disclaimer, and this video is what it is. So now that you understand that, I can proceed. Now, if you don't know, I am looking for a racket that I can extend. I've already explored basically every option on the retail market for extended length rackets, and most of them suck. And then a couple of them don't suck, but they're not quite for me, and I've spent quite a lot of time being absolutely sure about that, or, you know, spending time enough on the rackets so that I could be sure about that, right? So that's where I'm at. People can stop suggesting rackets for me, at least, you know, anything that is retail extended. I've tried all of them, and if they're discontinued also, because I get suggestions for that, I'm not going to get discontinued rackets because I can't even get grommets for them, you know, most of the time. So, I mean, yada yada. It's like, it's hard just scouring eBay and whatnot to find used rackets until there just aren't any anymore. So I'd really rather find something current. And yeah, I'm looking for a 20 cross racket. I want it to be a 1620 or an 1820. I'm not really interested in 1819. I want it to have 20 crosses. So hopefully everybody sees that video, but they won't, and I'll still get racket suggestions from my videos that say like why I'm selling this or that racket, and then they suggest, oh, how about this other racket that's totally not the kind of racket you're looking for. You know, I can only respond to so many of those, so hopefully you guys see this. Anyway, it's all good. I appreciate you. So with that all out of the way, let's talk about this racket a little bit more. I was hitting with 16 gauge strings for a long time, mostly because of my EZONE 98, which I sold. You can see that video. Maybe I'll leave a link here if I remember to. But yeah, it's called Why I Sold My EZONE 98. And majorly the reason was ridiculous, reckless, uncontrollable power to some degree. So I switched to 16 gauge strings to kind of deaden out the racket. So much of my racket journey with the EZONE 98 was about how can I tame the power. So I just went to 16 gauge strings and probably appreciated the ones that kind of suck the power out of the EZONE as much as possible. But then when you find a string that does that well and then you try to maybe put it in the VCORE 95, it's not so nice, you know? I think that's probably what was going on when I first got this racket. When I first got this racket, actually, it came from eBay. I bought it used, and it probably had like Poly Tour Pro 17 gauge strung in there. I'm not 100% sure, but that would be my guess. And it felt pretty good. It felt decent. I felt like maybe I wasn't getting enough spin. Power was all right. And after I broke those strings, maybe 4 or 5 hits in, I strung up Tier 1 Black Knight in 16 gauge at 48 pounds. And that did not feel so good. And I gave that some time until I just decided to cut it out because it felt worse than whatever my strings were when this racket came with, when it came strung. And so I figured it's maybe the gauge, maybe the string, maybe both. I figured I can go back down to 17 or something like that. And you guys had some cool suggestions in the shorts, but ultimately I actually didn't go with any of the suggestions. I did buy Confidential, but I didn't put Confidential in my racket because I kind of get the impression that's a stiffer string, and that's probably not the way to go for this racket right now. I went to an old favorite, I would say. It's the Yonex Quadro Twist. And that is probably only made in 16L. I think that's the case. That's a great string. It's actually a pretty high power, lively string. You guys got to remember polyester strings in general are kind of low power, but if you're just comparing poly to poly, some are higher power than other polyesters. And Yonex might be on the higher end of the power spectrum for polyester strings. I would probably put my money on that. I've tried a lot. And there's just something kind of special about this string. It's pretty elastic. It has a very kind of soft quality to it, but it's very slippery. It does have a shape, but it's kind of a soft shape. They call it Quadro Twist, but it's not like Torbite or Black Widow where there's some sharp polygon shape, you know? There's not any rough corners. This racket offers pretty good touch, and I'm much more happy with this racket with this string. And there's probably a few strings that this racket would work really well with for me. I'm sure that's the case, but this is a string that I used to love before I went to the EZONE 98 and ultimately realized that the EZONE 98 is just a very powerful racket and there's only so much you can do about that. But I really tried to make it work because it was like the last extended length racket on the retail market that I thought might be able to work for me, and then I gave up after that in the VCORE 98 pretty much. And then I'm thinking, well, I haven't tried the pure drive, but you know, I'm not a pure drive guy really. And that was that. Oh, we gotta watch this point real quick. What is that old saying again? It's the player, not the racket. Yeah, that's the saying. I don't say that, you know, but other people say that. And it's just interesting that I chose to say that at that point in the video. Anyway, so now I'm extending my rackets, and I have to look at stuff that has a low swing weight and has all the other characteristics that I want, but also has a low swing weight, which really narrows down the options, you guys. I don't know if anyone appreciates the struggle. I mean, who's out there trying to find a retail racket that you can extend? Who's out there on that struggle with me? Come on. I get a lot of people just telling me, why do you just use standard length, you know? Like, oh my gosh. Oh my gosh, they just don't know. They don't appreciate it. I'm going to make a video on why I prefer extended length rackets, okay? I'll make that video sometime. But then I'll still get people suggesting that because they'll watch these old videos and they won't see that. But yeah, if you see this one, maybe you'll get it a little bit. Anyway, I think my favorite way of summing up this racket is that it gives you what you put into it. If you can hit with a lot of topspin, you'll definitely get good topspin out of this racket. And if you have a lot of power, you'll get good power out of this racket. But you got to work for it. So whatever you want from this racket, you got to work for it. But I think it'll give you it. It has good control. It has good touch. It has good feel. But it isn't so much so that the racket kind of does all that for you, or that it kind of fits into a box of playing. It's an extremely versatile racket, and I think it's one of those rackets that kind of any level of player can appreciate because it's light enough for beginners, you know? I'm not saying that a beginner should go out there and buy whatever this racket costs. It's like maybe 240 bucks, I'm not sure, maybe 229, something like that. It's not a cheap racket, but it is pretty light and it's easy to swing and it's got good control and it's pretty comfortable. Like it really kind of, it's such a good middle ground racket, but it's not the kind of middle ground racket where it feels like, it doesn't really do anything well. It kind of does everything well. It's one of those rackets. It just kind of does everything well. And the more skill you have and the more versatility you have, I think the more value and versatility you will get out of this racket. I suppose somebody who's just like a straight attacking player or maybe like a really serve and volley type of player, this racket might not be their kind of racket, but it also totally could be. It's hard to say. And also I think maybe the type of player who's really like into the Aero Pro or pure Aero now and is just super heavy topspin and really kind of follows Nadal's technique and whatnot. I know some guys like that. You see them out there. Maybe this racket wouldn't really feel like it fits into that box so well. But if you appreciate that and you'd like to hit through the ball sometimes too, like I would say I do, I feel like this racket is perfect. If you have a more advanced game, but you also have some more extreme qualities to your game, like maybe you're a pretty versatile player, but you also have a really nasty slice, or you're really good at volleys, or you have a lot of topspin, you know what I mean? And you don't want to lose that. So you want a racket that gives you good control, but it also doesn't totally cripple some of your strengths. And like in the same train of thinking, you don't have to get a racket that only plays to your strengths and then totally does nothing to help you on your weaknesses, right? So I think this is a really good racket in that regard. It's very versatile and it does a lot of things very well. And that's what people say about it. And after putting these strings in it, and I've gotten to know this racket for a while, I've played with it a lot, I've done a lot of research on it, but also just played with it a lot. That's exactly how I would describe it too. So regardless of what people said, I think that's pretty much how I would describe it. And that's kind of the racket I'm looking for. This racket definitely, I think I could switch to it, but it's a little bit soon to say. I'm excited to try the Pure Aero VS and see what I think of that. There aren't too many rackets left for me to feel like I should give a chance, so to speak. I think this is one of them, and I'm getting to know my Angell, but it's a 28-inch racket, and the swing weight is really high, so it's kind of likely that I'll either shorten it or maybe go with something else. But we'll see what I do. I'm not totally sure what I'm going to do. That's kind of where we're at. So, the Pure Aero VS, I'm excited to get that racket in, and I think it'll be similar to this racket, but I'm hoping maybe it'll be a touch more power and a touch more spin, feel me? I want to see what that's like. Because I'll say this, like while the VCORE 95 is very versatile, I certainly wouldn't want it to have any less spin. I'm good with the amount that it has, but sometimes I feel like I want a little more though, just a little more. And would I be willing to trade something off for that? Maybe. I could trade off a little stability for that, and I'd be cool with it. So we'll see. I certainly wouldn't want less spin, but I wouldn't say that it's not enough. You know what I mean? So if the Pure Aero VS got it right that time, nailed it, good. If the Pure Aero VS gives me a little bit more spin and a little more power, maybe I might gravitate towards that. It's hard to say. I'm going to need some time with it to really see, but yeah, that's a promising racket on paper, and some people have suggested it, and I'm just really curious about it. So that might be the next racket, but this isn't my last review on the VCORE 95. This is a review and kind of an update on where I'm at with it and what I think about it, and the strings that I have in it, and a bit of my string journey that was necessary to figure out how I like this racket setup. So I'm definitely starting to dial in on how I really like my VCORE 95 to feel, and that's great, and I appreciate the suggestions. I think ultimately I didn't get any of the strings that people really suggested. I got confidential but didn't put it in, but I did kind of get the concept of, you know, maybe I should actually get a thinner gauge, and maybe I need to go even lower in the tension. So I actually kept the same tension, but I strung it with a string that is much more lively. The Quadro Twist was always a string that I would recommend going up like 4 or 5 pounds. So I actually strung it at the same tension I strung my Black Knight in at 48 pounds. So I thought that's appropriate, right? It's kind of as if I'm stringing it at like 44, 45, sort of, you know. So yeah, Quadro Twist at 48 feels super good. I'm actually not sure if I'd want to go higher or lower. I kind of feel like this is super close to exactly how I want it. So we'll see. It's my first hit with that, so obviously kind of in the honeymoon period a little bit, but yeah, you could see how I hit. I got the spin, I got the power, I got the touch, so it's all there. It's all there. This is definitely a racket that works pretty well for me. So I'm just gonna, this one might be my point of reference, and whatever comes into play next has to outdo this racket in some fantastic way or meaningful way altogether. So we'll see what that racket is. So stay tuned. I'll make some more content. I want to give a shout out to VT Advantech. They make the leather grips that I put on all my rackets, and I'll have to do a special video on that sometime. I feel like I use some of the same equipment in all my videos, and I just want to let you guys know that. So that's definitely something you can check out, and I'll do more videos on that in the future. But I have a lot to say, and this video isn't going to quite cover everything, so stay tuned, and I will see you guys in the next one. Subscribe, like, I'll see you in the comments, and yeah, I will catch you guys in the next one. See you later. Thanks for watching.